I want to be very direct with you right now because I do not have time for softness, and frankly, neither do you. I said something publicly this week that most people read past without understanding what it actually means. I said that America will be almost unrecognizable in 5 years. Not different, not changed, unrecognizable, and I chose that word with precision because I have spent 50 years studying what happens to countries when 5 specific forces converge simultaneously, and I have never used that word lightly in my entire career. The last time I saw a configuration of forces this severe was in the 1930s. I am going to give you a specific number in about 90 seconds that tells you exactly why I use that word and exactly what it means for every dollar you own right now. Stay with me, because this is the most important context I can give you in 2026. Subscribe to this channel right now, not at the end. Now, what I am walking you through in this video is the framework I have developed across 5 decades of studying monetary transitions, debt cycles, and the rise and fall of world powers. Subscribe and then do not move. Here is the number: 7 trillion versus 5 trillion. The United States government spends approximately $7 trillion per year. It collects approximately $5 trillion in revenue. That $2 trillion annual gap is not a budget problem. It is a structural mathematical reality that is only one resolution path in the absence of dramatic political action that I do not see coming. And here is why that gap leads to the word unrecognizable. When a government runs deficits at this scale for this long, the circulatory system of the economy begins to tighten. The credit system that brings buying power to every part of the economy starts to clog. I have described it this way publicly, and I will say it again here. When debts and debt service rise relative to income, that squeezes out spending. That is a problem that compounds over time, and the compounding is already underway. The United States currently pays over $1 trillion per year in interest alone on its debt. That number is larger than the entire defense budget. It grows automatically every day without a single vote in Congress. And here is the part that makes unrecognizable the right word rather than difficult or challenging. The 5 forces I am going to describe are not 5 separate problems. They are 5 doors to the same room, and they are all opening simultaneously. Are you the kind of person who hears a number like 7 trillion versus 5 trillion and files it away as a political talking point? Or are you the kind of person who understands that this gap represents a mathematical constraint that reshapes every financial decision every American will make for the next decade? Because those 2 understandings lead to completely different portfolios. And right now, in May 2026, the gap between those 2 portfolios is the most important financial fact in your life. Stay with me because I am going to show you exactly where each of the 5 forces stands right now. The first force is the debt and monetary cycle. I just described the fiscal arithmetic, but the monetary dimension is where it becomes genuinely dangerous. The Federal Reserve is caught in a trap that has no clean exit. If it raises rates to defend the dollar and fight inflation, the government's interest payments on $40 trillion of debt grow further, and the economy contracts. If it cuts rates under political pressure, inflation accelerates, and the purchasing power of every dollar-denominated asset you hold erodes faster. If it does nothing, the structural deterioration continues on its current trajectory. There is no option that does not involve pain. And the most likely resolution, based on my study of every historical instance of this configuration, is the one that protects the nominal numbers while destroying the real purchasing power. Financial repression, deliberate debasement, making every dollar worth less while the account balance stays stable. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren not yet born are going to be paying off this debt in devalued dollars. I said that publicly because it is what the mathematics tells me. The second force is the domestic political and social order. I have described this in multiple interviews this year, and I will be direct about it here. Wealth inequality in the United States is at historic highs. The differences between left and right have become what I call irreconcilable differences. And when irreconcilable differences combine with an economic environment that is squeezing the middle, the political system faces pressures that can tip toward broader disorder. I am not predicting civil war. I am documenting what the historical pattern looks like when these specific conditions have appeared in other countries at other times in history. The next 2 to 3 years, in my assessment, represent a riskier period for American political stability than anything I have seen in my career, and political instability feeds directly back into the fiscal problem. A paralyzed Congress cannot address a $2 trillion annual deficit, and so the circulatory system tightens further. The third force is the international geopolitical order. This is where I used the phrase capital war publicly this week. And I want to explain precisely what I mean because it is the most important concept for investors right now. For 50 years, money has moved relatively freely across global financial markets. That free flow of capital is the invisible foundation of the entire system. It is why American companies can borrow cheaply. It is why the dollar commands a reserve currency premium. It is why U.S. Treasury bonds have been the world's safe asset. In February 2022, the United States and its allies froze $300 billion of Russian foreign currency reserves overnight. With a digital instruction, every central bank on the planet drew the same conclusion simultaneously. Dollar reserves held outside America can be confiscated. The safe haven status of the dollar as a neutral reserve currency was permanently compromised in the eyes of every government that had ever considered itself a potential adversary. What I am calling a capital war is the consequence of that event playing out across global financial markets right now. Countries are not just diversifying away from the dollar. They are actively restructuring their financial systems to reduce their exposure to a system they no longer fully trust. And that restructuring reduces the demand for American debt at exactly the moment America needs to sell more of it than ever before. The fourth force is the technology disruption. I want to be careful here because I am not a pessimist about artificial intelligence. I believe AI will ultimately create enormous economic value. But I also believe that the current market is pricing that value in on a timeline that history suggests is optimistic. And I said publicly this week something that I think most investors missed. Transformational technologies often create enormous economic value while simultaneously producing speculative excess. Investors are behaving as though AI adoption guarantees perpetual valuation expansion. I have watched this pattern before. In 2000, it was telecommunications infrastructure. The thesis was correct. The internet did transform the economy, but the stocks priced for that transformation fell 90% before the actual value creation arrived. AI is a revolutionary technology. The stocks priced for the AI future are not immune from the historical pattern, simply because the underlying technology is real. The fifth force is what connects all the others, and what makes unrecognizable the right word. Acts of nature and climate disruption are adding stress to already strained federal budgets in ways that compound the fiscal problem I described at the beginning.